So now we're going to kind of share our career journeys. I'll record mine. I won't record students, but um, the uh, the thing about this is basically uh, not everybody plans on being a counselor from the beginning. There's twists and turns on our life journey that brought us here today, and then kind of want to hear where you'd like to go after you get your degree. But I'll share my story first. Um, and so um, I hated school. Um, couldn't stand school. And so as soon as I turned 13 or 14, I I got a special note from my parents to go get a part-time job, and that released me from school for half the school week. So I was working at North American Moving Company, and uh, learned all different roles there. And my father liked cars, but he really wasn't into the mechanics part. So I felt kind of like I'm missing a little something uh, in that area. Because all my friends were, thinking about getting a car and fixing engines and all that kind of stuff. So it was it really added kind of a missing part of my life when they brought me into the garage and taught me how to work on not cars but trucks. And so I did learn quite a bit there, and really enjoyed the people that I worked with as really a teenager. Um, and so my my parents made me take, the SATs, and I then I got a call from the counselor, and my counselors, when I talk with counseling students, they tell me either their school counselor was horrible, and that's why they want to be one to be a good school counselor, or they tell me how fantastic their counselor was. My counselor was fantastic. Anytime I was having a bad day with a teacher, I could go down and sit in her office and read a book. So she was pretty understanding that way. And she calls me down. We had 750 kids in our graduating class in Chambersburg, Pennsylvania. And so it was a pretty large rural school. Um, and he says, well, all these years, I thought you were struggling, but really you're just bored and an underachiever. You can, with these scores, you could probably go to college if you wanted to. And so so I talked with my sister, and she's 10 years older than me. So she was both a sibling, but also she helped to take care of me and my brother. And so she was managing some drugstores at the time. And so she got me a part-time job at a drugstore. Uh, and she says, she was a manager of the drugstore. She started out as a cashier. And but she said, where it's at is if you became a pharmacist. And so I like studying medications and drugs, so like I might enjoy that. But so but the more I worked in the drugstore, the more claustrophobic I felt. And I just couldn't see myself working behind a counter for an extended period of time. So I had gone to Duquesne and for pharmacy, and after a year and a half, I quit Duquesne and moved back to my parents. And my parents said, well, you've got to get a job and you've got to go to school if you're going to live at home. So got a job at one of the first computer stores and went to Shippensburg University, which is just like Cal U. And it's the very first university that I felt like the professors listened to me, like they cared about me. I didn't get that in high school. I didn't get it at Duquesne, but they genuinely spent time with me and cared about me. And the computer store, I got to learn a lot about first I started in sales, and then I started learning different programs. And then they took me back to fix computers and build computers. And so that's always kind of been my side gig throughout my entire life. But, I'm like, I don't want to be in pharmacy. I don't want to study science. And I had to go to college. So, I decided to do something I enjoyed, which was reading and writing. And so I just took English Lit and took psych as a minor because I thought it was just something interesting. And but I really enjoyed it and I excelled at it, and probably because I enjoyed it. And but graduation came around, and I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. And so I had been just attending my local church, but a lot of the classes I took, they were like classes on Milton, Paradise Lost, Paradise Regained, a lot of classics, but they also happened to be a little religious. And so I applied to I don't know, half a dozen of the best writing schools for a master's degree. And my professor said, why don't you just apply to one seminary? You might want to study religion. And so just to make him happy, I applied to a school I thought I'd never get accepted to, Princeton. And turns out I got turned down by every school I applied to but seminary. So, I guess it was meant to be. So I went to seminary, studied world religions, studied pastoral counseling, spent a lot of time in India studying various religions, and I enjoyed that too. In order to keep my scholarship there, I had to work with churches in some way. So I became a youth director, and didn't think I'd like it either, but I really liked talking to kids about their problems, because I guess I used to be a kid with a lot of problems. And so I really found that satisfying, and I got along with young kids. And so ended up not knowing what I was going to do after graduation again. Ended up in a really rural town. In order to take the job at a couple rural churches, I also had to agree to drive their ambulance, because the last minister and youth director drove the ambulance and he's not there anymore. So somebody had to drive the ambulance. I think they hired me to drive the ambulance, actually. So it was so rural. Nobody had any money. There were no hospitals. There were definitely no mental health services. I was a free service, so everybody would come to me with their issues, but I didn't feel qualified to help them. So after a few years, I went back to Shippensburg to a counseling program, almost exactly like this counseling program. And my professor said, well, why don't you just get certified in school counseling while you're at it? You never know. And I'm like, I hated school. Why would I want to go back to school? It's like, well, I bet a lot of kids hate school. Why don't you go back and help them out? And so I did, and ended up um, at a three rural elementary schools, and I loved elementary school. I loved working with the little kids. I'd still be an elementary school counselor today. Had an old professor from Shippensburg not called me, and he said, "Hey, they're starting a new program at Duquesne." I'm like, "I tried Duquesne. I didn't like it." He's like, "You're not married. Why don't you go back before you have a family and get your doctorate?" And I'm like, "Well, okay." So I did. Um, and the I found it, you know, very interesting because I never thought I would do any of these things. I never thought I'd do anything with a church. I never thought I'd be a school counselor. I never thought I'd be a teacher. But I really enjoyed teaching college students. And so it's just weird how these things work out. Um, and I guess the one thing I learned about it was that I had to open myself up to opportunities, and things happen for a reason. And I have to give um, unexpected possibilities a chance in my life. So I was able, uh, I was able to work at the Citadel, and then my parents got older and I needed to move back to Pennsylvania to help them out. And so I taught at Chatham and started their school counseling program. And I was able to volunteer outside for all of my other interests. So I worked for almost 10 years in the summers at a camp for kids with disabilities. And their goal was to help these kids who had some disability or terminal illness. And they wanted them to have the same experience as any other child at camp. So they were able to go camping and do archery. It didn't matter whether they were in a wheelchair or, had some other disability. But so I was able to do that. And eventually, time moves pretty quickly in our lives. Eventually, I found myself, I was 41 years old, and I had an apartment in Shadyside, and I was living by myself, and I kind of came to this conclusion, well, maybe I'm not supposed to have a family. Maybe I'm supposed to work with these kids. Maybe that's what I'm called to do. And I finally kind of resolved that inner turmoil that I should do something. I should have a family. I should be this, whatever it is. And I was happy where I was at. And, and the very next year I got married, and I've got 4 kids. Bam. So, but as soon as I kind of let go of that, I should have or I should be, things kind of happened. So I can honestly say that as soon as I heard about a job opening at Cal U, I applied for it. It actually is my dream job, because it reminds me of my own experiences when I went to Shippensburg, and I like the type of students that come here. And I like the ability to talk with them and get to know them and work on projects with them. That's why I like face-to-face programs. It's so difficult to have the same type of relationship with students online. You can learn what you need to, but there's another dimension. to the learning process that takes more time than just an hour or two online. So one of the examples is I remember Jake Wheatley when he was a student, and he really wrote some good research papers. And we sent one of his papers into the International Congress of Psychology, and we got to go to Paris and present. And now he's a professor. So, I think there's a lot of possibilities that students don't realize. I didn't. All right, so that's my story. We were going to have 3 kids, and then 5 years later, we have a 5-year-old now, which pushed back my retirement considerably. All right, I'm going to stop recording, and now it's your turn.